Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Drawing X Live with me, Jedidiah Dore. I'm an artist and illustrator here at Drawing Expressions. Today, we're going to be focusing on drawing with found objects. How fun is that? That's going to be pretty cool, right? So for this Drawing X Live class with me, we're going to experiment with a variety of found materials to use in our sketches. And I'll also demonstrate a little art process that I know it'll be easy for you using just one layer, maybe two, to elevate your creativity and enhance your drawings a little bit more. So let's get right to it. We have a lot of fun drawing to do. And let me introduce you to some of the tools I'll be using today. And that's really the fun part. Funnest part, the most exciting part of today is the drawing tools we're going to be using, right? So we're going to be using, hopefully, you're able to find some objects around the house or maybe outside. If not, you can use some things that you probably don't know that you could probably use for being creative with drawing. So let's go right to my desktop so I can show you some of the things that I'll be using for today. All right, here we go. And so this is going to be really cool because I kind of gathered some things around the house and outside of the house. But first things first, let me introduce you to a couple of my drawing sticks that I found outside of my house a while back. And they've just always been fun to draw with. So this is just a really skinny, small twig that I shaved the tip of. And it's been really handy for all kinds of different drawings. Somehow it's all held together still, so it's still working good for me. And then I also like the curvature of this piece of this twig. It kind of lends itself to drawing in different ways and making different marks. And then I have this piece of wood. It's really just a stick of a piece of wood. It looks like it came from maybe some fencing. I saw it on the sidewalk by my house, and I just shaved the tip off. You can see here that I shaved the tip, and almost like it almost draws a bit like a reed pen or bamboo pen. So that's pretty cool. There's all kinds of things you could do with some different found sticks and twigs because you could probably shave it down and make a little gutter to hold a little bit more ink if you want. You can make the edges flat or square if you want, for example. So that's pretty cool. And then I have some things around the house that I thought would help. Now, here's the cool thing about today is I have no idea how these are going to work because I have some ink here. I'll show you guys. But I have a standard, detail brush pen, brush, I mean, and obviously that's a go-to when it comes to working with ink. And if you have a dip pen, that works. But I wanted to introduce you to just a nice, simple detail brush because it has long bristles, and that makes for some really good line work and line variation. And here's a couple of things that are pretty funny because I have basically an old pencil that I had um, rolled up with some old duct tape, some old really strong kind of gaffer's tape or duct tape. And you could see the tip of it there. It's almost like a nib, it's square. So I just flattened it. I taped around the edge of the pencil and just flatten the edge. So that's going to be interesting because it might just work. We'll see how it handles the ink. And then this I thought about using this because it already has, well, it has a little ring to hold and it has a nice handle on it. And it's really meant to open up paint cans, right? So this tip here opens the lid. But I thought this tip here would be pretty cool to experiment with to see what kind of lines we can create with it, right? So let's first do that because I think it's great to just kind of experiment to see what kind of different line that you can make with these different tools, right? So I have some inks as well. I have, well, I don't know if I'm going to be using all three of these, right? But I do have variety. So I have a blue and an umber ink that are, it's not waterproof, but they're still really good inks. And so those are the two options there for colored inks. And then I have black, which is a waterproof ink. So that's a good, always good to have a waterproof ink with you whenever you're going to be using any kind of water media like watercolor or gouache with your drawings, right? And the other stuff I was talking about when it comes to elevating your drawings is adding a wash in the background. That's always really nice to create some atmosphere and to create some nice a nice mood for your drawing. So I have some pastels here. Um, celebrate spring because spring is now upon us, and I have some other watercolors. 24 set here with some nice vibrant colors, right? But first, let's see what these different pens or different drawing tools will do. Just to expand with them. So I'll put them over here to the side so you guys can see what I'm using, right? And so the funny thing is, typically these little bottles of ink come with the little, the little squares that pick up the ink. You can actually draw with them, right? So if you take a little bit of ink, pick it, which is already at the tip, you can create some interesting lines with it. You can kind of draw some thick and thin lines. And I kind of like how it tapers off when it does eventually run out of ink. So that's interesting already. But let's put this over here to the side. Now I'm dying to see how this is going to work. I don't know. This might fail miserably, but that's okay because this is all about experimentation because we're just curious, right? We're just following our curiosity and see where it leads us. And let's see how this works. So this is just duct tape around an old pencil. And look at that. Wow, that's pretty interesting, right? Now it doesn't hold the ink too much, but it does create some really, really interesting marks and variation. So that's pretty cool. I think the first mark is almost like a fountain pen nib, and the rest of it creates this really nice texture depending on how you wrap the tape around the pencil. So that's really cool. And goes without saying that the right tools can make drawing much, much easier, right? The right tools can make drawing more comfortable and more efficient. And for example, well-balanced pencil can make it easier to create smooth lines and shades without putting too much pressure and no stress on us, right? And for advanced drawing as well, technical pens and pencils can aid you with precision. But what we're going after today is variety and change and creativity and a little bit of energy and some interesting marks that very curious to make it more dynamic, right? So that's this one here. That's the duct tape. Let's try this one. I've been dying to use this one. Just painting a large mural this week, and I've been using this to open up some paint cans. So I thought, this would be interesting to draw with. So I'm not sure exactly how it's going to perform, but let's just see. I'm going to guess it's going to behave similar to a flat pen or almost like a pilot pen or calligraphy pen, right? So that's pretty interesting. So the line has some really great impact to it. It's got some weight to it. It doesn't hold very much. It doesn't hold the ink very much, but that's already pretty interesting. Very similar to the duct tape, right? But already look at the difference in line work that we have. The different types of line variation that we have. That's really key to creating some interesting drawings. Right, so just gonna wipe the tip off here, set this aside. And that's going to be good for maybe creating some texture or some different backgrounds that we want to incorporate in our drawing, right? So now let's get more and more It's so funny to say advanced when they just found these on the sidewalk or out in the park. So I want to show you this handy dandy twig that I found, and how cool is it to draw with this? It's almost like a pen, really. I mean, look at the different types of line that you can create, and it goes pretty good. It goes pretty consistent. You can create a pretty good long line with it until it runs out. It just kind of soaks up into the wood, obviously. Uh, but you could see that it creates a more fanciful, more elegant line and thinner line. So that's probably good for sketching as well. I haven't used the other tip of it, which is really just the end of the twig that's got kind of nub to it. It almost acts like a pen, like a drawing pen. It's a little nub that you put the places into your palm. All right, so that's the twig here on the bottom. Now let's try this drawing stick. This is cool. I like to kind of soak up a little bit more ink in there, and you can see it's soaked up quite a bit in there, right? And I like to kind of turn it on its side to create some really heavy marks. And look what happens with this line. It's just amazing, right? I mean, talk about line variation. Look at that. It's almost like you're getting all of the above, all of the characteristics and all of the different types of line that you're getting with just this one stick, because there's all kind of grain in there and texture in there that's adding to that, right? To that line. I mean, it's funny to call it a line because it's really just, it's almost like a painting, uh, reads like a brush painting or a brush mark, because it has so much texture and depth to it. And here's just a detail brush. It's got nice long bristles to it, nice long hair to it. So it creates a nice, long, very long, elegant line that just goes on and on for days. So let's start up here, right? And sometimes if you press down hard enough, you can create some different width, some different impact, and different intensity. I mean, this just goes on and on and on. It's a great, 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 great drawing tool, right? Probably the best of all of them, but considering, look at all these different marks that we're able to create with just these found objects. Not bad, right? All right. So good hunting for you guys to go seek out something different things and get creative. But I can't wait now, after seeing all of these different marks that we've made. I'm excited to see what kind of drawings we can do with them, right? So I think this is kind of good to set aside and just really think about how we can use these different types of mark for our drawings. I'm going to put this up here on the side, so that way it kind of reminds me of what kind of marks I can make with these different tools. I bet you didn't think that some of these tools you can, now you're going to be looking at some of the stuff around your house and thinking, Jedidiah is right. What can I possibly draw with next? There's going to be some things you'll discover that's going to really work for you. Right. So let's do this. Let's get right into um, just creating some background, some depth, some moods, and different kind of textures and vibrancy, and just really overall feel to our drawing. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just kind of wet paper here, just a little bit of a wet palette. You can do this with just some water and a brush. Now let's see, did I not bring my brush? Okay, here it is. So thankfully, it's within reach. So I have just a nice thick brush here. Let's use this one. Boy, look at that brush. It looks like it's about a 1 inch, almost a 1 inch brush. And you can certainly use a brush to create a little bit of a wash on your paper, right? So we're going to draw this, it looks like it could be a hummingbird, but this really beautiful tropical bird on this red petaled flower. I'm going to draw that first for practice, right? So I'm going to take out my pastels and I'm just going to create a little bit of a wash here, just using some nice colors. Let me celebrate spring because we got spring season finally here and the weather's warming up and the sun's out. Not so much today, but that's okay. The sunbeams are out and it's going to make for some great drawing for us here in New York. So I'm gonna just create a couple of different washes here just to make it interesting. Already I'm loving the color because they're very spring-like, these pastels. I've been using them a lot, especially that there's a lot of pink in the colors that I love. And I'm just using more pigment than water to really concentrate the color. And being that this is still pretty wet, I'm going to go ahead and just put down some of the color. Now, I'm not using a watercolor paper, so that's why it's going to get dimpled, but that's okay because I'm not going to use that much of a wash. And I'm just going to create some interesting textures. We're going to get into a lot of different types of things, but mainly textures today, different types of marks that are interesting. And as the brush sort of dries, I'm kind of fan it out. And just like the found tools that we have, create some really interesting marks, right? So let's zoom in a little bit closer there. You can see nicely. Okay, and then just a little bit of water since we have some color already here. Let's add some more color to that. And just be intuitive, just play around a bit and add a variety of color, just whatever suits you, whatever feels right, feels good to use. That's always a great way to make art, always a great way to draw and paint. It's just using your instinct. Right? That it's looking great already. It already has a mood to it. It breaks that kind of white, sort of cold white space that you have with the paper that's has nothing there and can be very intimidating if you stare at it for a long time. So this is a good way to sort of break it down and make it more friendly. That's what we want, right? I'm just going to spread a little bit more of this kind of lilac color here. And some people will do this to their sketchbooks ahead of time, their watercolor paper ahead of time. It's not a bad idea if you consider, you know, you won't have to do it on the spot and you won't have to bring your watercolors if you know you're just going to be drawing. It's a good way to really enhance your drawings. I'm adding a little bit of blue here, just this corner, create some contrast, just a slight bit of contrast in the drawing. So that's looking really beautiful. Look at that, very spring-like. And while this is drying, okay, I'm going to use a different color palette for our elk drawing, our beautiful elk drawing. I'm just going to let this sort of soak up that water. You can see if you don't use watercolor paper, you can see that it kind of buckles and dimples, right? So I just expect that and be okay with that because, you know, it's very thin paper. And I think this is 60-pound paper. It's drawing paper. So expect that. And I'm going to just put this aside and give it time to dry. That's really the key for your watercolor washes, is to give things time to dry so that they don't get muddy, and also it doesn't mix with your ink when you're drawing on top of them. Let's put this over here. that's a good place to off to the side here. So now let's create a different mood here. I'm gonna use mostly green for this color palette. So we have some beautiful greens here in this paint pen set. And let's just make a variety of greens. Why not? Let's do it. Right. This is just a great process. It just kind of livens up your drawings and adds a different layer to them. Okay. There we go. Let's make, what do you say? I think we should make maybe 3 different types of green. I think that'd be interesting. And don't worry about, I don't have to worry about the colors that are already there on the palette. I kind of like it when things mix around like that. Makes for some interesting colors and more natural colors. I like to mix my pigments a lot, rather than using them straight from the tube, or in this case, the squares. Right. And then maybe a lighter one. Maybe we might make 4. And this one's really beautiful. It's this bright, almost lime colored. It's very fluorescent colored. So that's going to make an interesting color. And let's just do one more. Just to play around. Let's make a darker green. Boy, look at that. That's a good one. Okay. All right. So here, I'm not going to bother with the spray. I'm just going to create a nice thin wash. Clean the brush a little bit. Okay. Very nice. And then I'm just going to brush it across here, maybe go vertical on this one, a little bit more vertical and horizontal. And see how that looks. It's kind of emulating the growth of the tree and the grass, the wild grass and the flowers. So let's start with the lightest color here, just in the foreground, and go right to it. And I'm not going to add any more water to the pigment because I want to make sure that I don't add too much water to this drawing or to the paper because it's not watercolor paper. And just right to the next color. It's a little bit darker, a little bit more truer green. Just kind of layering that, right? And then on to the next one. This is more of a pure green. I'm going to add this right here, this background. Oh, I could do this all day. It's so fun to do this. Look at those brush marks that we're seeing in the drawing. Very interesting. And then our darkest color, green, it's almost like a forest green. Boy, this is going to be really nice on here. Let's wet the brush just slightly. Go. And just in a few areas here, just kind of to emulate some of the shading of the trees and some of the bushes underneath here, right? And then you can clean the brush, right? Clean the brush, take off most of the excess water on there, right? And then you can just kind of fan out a little bit. This is where it gets really fun. This is where it starts to get interesting right here. You're just kind of tickling this green, kind of brushing it off into different directions here, like so. Right? Kind of softening up some of the wash too. Not all of it. You can kind of leave some of it alone. And boy, is that interesting. Look at that. I mean, that's already making for a beautiful painting, isn't it? Really cool. All right. So now that we have these two, I mean, I know we have 3 drawings, so we'll get to the third drawing, but I'm pretty sure that that first wash is nice and dry. So we'll put this aside and gather that first wash that we did, and we're going to start to draw with some of these really cool tools that we found and created, really. So let's set these aside here. And look at this, my gosh, look at how interesting those marks are, right? It's a little bit dark in this light here, but it's a lot more truer green in on my desktop than it is there on the monitor. So here's right back to where we were with this first wash. The interesting thing is there's really no right side of it. If you really take a look at it, you can kind of turn it around. You can create for a vertical, vertical drawing as well. I just decided, let's do that. Let's make this a vertical piece because it is kind of a vertical orientation. So let's do that. So there's always something interesting happening, right? So let's do that. The paper's a little bit longer than the desk space that I have here. So let's move this back just slightly. There we go. And let's darken this a bit so it's not so entirely bright for you guys. There we go. That's much better. You can see a little bit more of the subtlety in the color. So I decided to make this a vertical piece because I think it's really interesting. It's going to make for a more interesting drawing. If you're not sure if it's dry just yet, a good thing to do is just sort of pat it dry with paper towels or a rag. The back side isn't wet, so it's just the front side's a little bit damp. And you can kind of tell when it's cool to the touch, when something is still a little bit damp, and you can kind of take out more of that moisture that's going to really help the draw right on top of it. Easy process, right? Because, when we're outside, it can dry a lot faster and air dry a lot faster. And then, of course, the sunlight will make it dry in just a few minutes, really. So that feels good. That feels like it's, there's no smearing there. It's nice and dry. All right. So I can't decide what tool we're going to use because of all these really interesting lines. So I think here's what I want to do. I want to experiment with creating some of this texture that we created with the stick. And I believe this duct tape, believe it or not, this is good for something today. So we're going to use that. We're going to use this and the stick to create some texture first. Right? So let's do this. I'm going to use this brown. It's just a regular brown, it looks like. And I'm just gonna use the edge of this tape to create some really interesting line work, or really just marks. Okay, so let's put this over here, and we're taking a look at our reference. We're not going to draw the reference just yet because we want to create almost like what we did with our color backgrounds. We're going to create a little bit of texture with this ink now. Right, so I'm going to dip what should we call this? Our duct tape, our tape pencil. All right, I'm going to take a little bit of the excess off the edge of it. Okay. And this is just really to create some really interesting marks. So just don't worry too much about it. Maybe start to compose the drawing a little bit with it, kind of roughly where some things might go. But for now, what I want to do is just add some different marks. Just be intuitive about those marks and just create some interesting graphics. Maybe even and smear some of the marks that you already have on there. Right, so that's interesting. And then while we're here, let's use the side of this stick here. Now I like the marks that we made. Remember the marks that we made with this stick when it began to run out of ink. So I'm gonna kind of wipe it down a little bit so that there's still some ink on there, but not much. And that's going to create for this really interesting kind of texture that we have that we're making here with just the texture of this piece of wood. Right. Let's move this forward. Here we go. Look at that. Look at those textures there. So let's keep doing that. I think that's really interesting. I'm going to make maybe the base of it a little heavier. The fun thing about this is there's no right or wrong. There's just what you're willing to discover, right? The more open you are to experimenting with this kind of way, this kind of, let's see what happens, state of mind, the more discoveries you're likely to make. Okay. All right, so that feels really good. That feels a lot like the outside. It feels like this backyard or this meadow that this bird is probably at. Okay, it's already starting to feel that way. So now let's set these aside and decide what we're going to use. I want to use a couple different things. Now I want to decide on number. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make that decision based on some of the preliminary line work that we did. I like the brushwork of this very elegant brushwork of this detail brush. So I'm going to use that for the flower. And I love how this line variation is made with this stick. So I'm going to draw the bird, try to draw the bird with this stick. Let's see what happens then. Okay. That's so good that we have this chart for reference. So I'm going to use this dry brush, or sorry, this detail brush to make an interesting flower that this bird is sitting on. Let's turn this down. There we go. All right, it's looking good. All right, let's push this back a bit. Show more of it. Okay. So same thing. I'm gonna just dip the length of the brush and wipe off the excess here. Right. And here's the key. Just be comfortable with your hand and just draw it. Don't worry too much about it. I'm just going to create this really nice, gentle, kind of flowy line. Take your time with this. Okay. It's almost Zen-like, really, with the feeling of just concentrating on the characteristic of that line and just really studying how it's formed and which direction it goes. Here, I'm just using the edge of the brush to create a very interesting line that just shoots all the way down, travels all the way down, and you can just kind of end it. Just kind of taper it off here. All right. Same thing here. Let's draw a little bit of the bud using just the tip of the brush. So, and then the other petals, that's important. Let's add the other one behind it, okay? Same thing, don't worry about it. Just nice and easy, using just the edge of the brush, just using your whole hand, really, your wrist, to make it nice and elegant and soft. If you're holding the tool soft, chances are you're going to draw a very soft, very elegant line. That's just how it works, right? Okay. Let's draw the top half to finish this nice composition, really. I love the diagonal, the kind of cross diagonal. The bird's kind of almost makes for an S. The bird is leaning this way and this flower is leaning to the right. It's a great composition. Okay, let's continue and add the top half of this drawing. I'll put this down here so you can see the top half of it. Okay. Here we go. And I like to use the back side of the brush almost like it's a reverse, but you can use it any way you want, whatever's comfortable for you, because I like to point it down and away from the line. But it depends on which direction the subject is going. You can kind of embellish it. Very nice. And then here, we start to put in a little bit more of the detail, right? Like some of the folds of the petal on the inside, you can make just a nice quick line from it, right? And then I like how that looks. I want to get a little bit more control, or at least a little bit smaller with some of those marks where the center where the bud is of the flower. So I'm gonna set this aside for now. I'm happy with that line. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Turn it on the side so you can see the length of it, right? Very cool. Look at that. It's already a nice design. So I'm going to use for the rest of the drawing the stick to make for more detailed marks on this flower's interior. So there's a few things kind of shooting off away in the center of the flower. So and oftentimes I'm just discovering how the tool works as I'm drawing. So that's a pretty neat feeling. And that's a great way to kind of change up your drawing and make it interesting, right? Also could practice all kinds of discovery. Look what we can draw with just a few found objects. That's looking good, right? I'll decide if I want to get more and more detailed here and maybe even add values, but I like the feel of this so far. Now, our little bird is just saying hello and saying, don't forget to draw me. So we didn't forget to draw you, bird, or you're next. Right, so a couple different things you can do if you're not sure. I'm going to move up the bird to about here, just so that it makes for a better sort of center of focus in the drawing, just slightly. If you're not sure, just find a contact point. For example, let's put in the legs, right, of the bird here. It's kind of wrapping around like so. And this one kind of goes this way. Right, nice and easy, just like that. So now you have some contact points where the bird is sitting. And just make a nice gestural line, just kind of sculpt it in place. So let's start with maybe the head here, right? Let's just draw that. Almost has a taper to it. Then the eye, just like that. And the beak is nice and curved and touching the stem of this flower. It's great. It makes for a great composition there, just like that. And then you can just kind of fit in the rest of the body here. Almost touches the branch down here. There's a curve, a little bit of a curve, like so, and tapers off. That. Pretty cool. And we can add a little bit here and there just to make adjustments if you want. The head's a little bit more round, for example, just like that. You can add the wing now. Kind of trails off like so. It just comes around here. And this leg, because it's kind of at a stance, we'll adjust it. We'll put it this way. And the other claw is just right here, just like that. And if you want, you can just, now you can begin to add a few details here and there, like where the feathers are. And some of the marks on eye, for example, and around the crest. There we go. Great, look at that. Kind of turn this closer. You can see it's got a nice feeling to the drawing. Turn it sideways so you can see the entire composition. Okay. And if you wanted to add more detail to it, like some patterns and some texture, you could do that. If you wanted to add a little bit more value, you can start to kind of shade it in, almost using this like a nib, a pen nib. So you can create some different values here with some line work that way. But I like the simplicity of the drawing in this way. So now I'm happy with this drawing. Let's take a look at what we can do with that elk piece, because this is really interesting. It's giving me a lot of ideas for what to do with the elk piece. I think I want this next one to be a little bit of a contrast to this bird drawing, because this is nice and light, very airy, and I want the other one to be very vibrant and more robust. So we'll use a different color. Let's use this blue, right? And this should be nice and dry now. Nice and dried up. Okay. So let's turn this way. Yeah, that looks good. Turn it this way. Got a nice vertical this way. So we decided last second we're going to make everything vertical. So that's okay. That's always, that happens, and that makes for always an interesting day when we do that. Right. So it used to be this way. This was really the left side of it, but we're going to turn it this way just to see how it looks. So I'm going to use some blue. This is just a standard, a little bit more, like a cobalt blue almost. And I'm going to use this time, all out with this. Let's use this strictly for this drawing, right? Maybe we haven't incorporated, because I want to use all of the tools that I discovered. This is the only thing we haven't used yet. So maybe let's do that. Let's add that in there. Okay, so first things first, let's just create a really interesting line, right? Because what we're going after today, so far so good, right? Because we're going after variety and change of marks and creativity, adding energy to the drawing, and of course, just really making for all of those combining, make for a very interesting piece, a very interesting sketch. Right? People are going to say, how did you do that? My goodness, your drawings are so original. Well, I'm just using sticks and things I found. Right. Now let's go ahead and just put in the head of the elk just to really place it in the right area. And I'm just going to make this mark here, like so, where the neck would be. Right. And I'm just going to make this drawing just really nice and expressive and really organic. Okay. And that's just being able to turn this stick kind of inside and up and around in all sorts of ways, really. And let's create the mouth is kind of off this way, like that. And I want to make kind of elongate this. That'd be really pretty. Just like that. Already looking really beautiful. And I'm just using just the edge of this stick that I found, and I'm creating these really bold marks, really. I'm just gonna go ahead and put one of the legs in the foreground so it has some kind of footing, right? Look at that. Isn't that great? That blue really goes well with this green background that we created. It's really nice. So let's continue that. I'm kind of tempted to keep this line going and just follow those horns all the way up. So I'm going to move our paper just slightly lower so you guys can follow along and see how I'm placing these marks here. Boy, this is fun. So look at this. I'm going to keep that flow in that direction going. This time with just using the stick, a handy dandy stick, to create some interesting marks. Look at that. Love these horns. They're beautiful. You can see that kind of velvet, a little bit of the velvet that lines the horns when they're being made still. And let's add the ears in so that it's got, makes sense where the head, back of the head is. And let's continue this line with this stick here and just kind of finishing up where the edge of the horns would be, what lines up. Kind of curves down and so on. Okay. Now let's add the other one. Boy, that's dramatic, isn't it? This comes up here like so. This comes around just nice and big. Just frames it. There's a little bit of a Y here. Just comes up like so. And this is taller, so let's make this taller and more organic because it kind of has a curve to it. Makes sense, right? Now, let's continue. Let's finish off the rest of it, the body here. Let's move this down. I love how this looks. Look at this line going from the nose down to the first leg in the foreground. It's a beautiful line. Just kind of continues. It almost looks like it was made with just one mark, with one line. Right, so I'm gonna keep using the side of it. And I'm just gonna put in the body, just kind of tapers around like so. And rear leg frames the rest of it like that. You don't even have to draw the bottom half, just kind of let it float down to the bottom like that. Right, so let's continue by finishing off, like just adding a few more detail to this elk, just including more information on the other legs here, so we know where it is, where it begins. And let's move this up. There we go. You can see a little better. Okay. And so this one here, it's easy to get lost with a complication when it looks kind of complex like this. Is pick one area and just focus on that so you don't get lost, and just draw that one, just about one bit really. There we go. And then here is the rear leg. I'm just gonna taper that off like so. Very good. Kind of crossing the legs, walking this way. All right. And I like the shape of this. I might just add a little bit more line to kind of imply the shape a little more of the body. That works quite well. All right. Okay. I think I'm happy with this line work using this stick. I might just add a few things here and there just for texture. For example, I might use the side of it to create a little bit more shape, right? And a little bit more tone if I want. And since I have a little bit more ink on there, I'm going to just do a few things of some wildflowers growing around the feet and maybe use the side of it to create some texture at the bottom. Use up all that ink that's on there. Take advantage of that. It's free ink we can use for the drawing, right? There we go. That's looking really great. So I'm going to turn this on the side because it's such a tall vertical. That way you can see a little bit more of how it's coming around. Look at that. It really is beauty. It's almost like just having that warm-up drawing really sets up what we're going to do going forward. Really does set it up. Okay, so let's turn it back on its side. And I do want to bring back our little twig. My little twig. This is what we were drawing the bird with because I want to include some line work that's more detailed on the face. I think that's a great idea. So let's do that. And remember this guy right here, this little dripper tool, we can kind of, remember you can draw with this. It's still got some ink on there, right? Right, see that? Isn't that interesting? To the mouth if you want. And add the curve of the jaw. Just like that. Good to draw with. So put this aside here and let's get back to the stick before I get carried away with that. It's a great nose. I think that kind of works. All right, so I'm soaking up a little bit more of the ink as much as I can, letting it kind of soak up into this, into the wood. And I'm just gonna choke up a little bit on this, almost like a pen. I'm gonna use it almost like a pencil now. And I'm gonna turn this off to just to the side so I can create some really interesting textures and lines. And let's draw the eye in. You know, the eye is really everything to drawing creature and drawing a living thing. It's all in the eyes, isn't it? It really is. Let's do a really good job with that, just so that, look at that. I love that. That's a good eye, right? Let's add the nose here and maybe just some texture here and there, just to make it interesting, right? Some of the curvature of the jaw, the snout, the underside of it. That's what I wanted to do with this twig, really. Just adding a little bit more information with it. And here it's nice and heavy, so we can create a lot of texture here, just around the neck, where it swoops down and creates a nice, heavy, dark tone around the neck. And just experiment with it. You know, I love, for example, I'm not trying to fight the tool. I'm just accepting the marks that it's making and just kind of working with it. I think that's a great way to draw with these tools because, you know, there's a lot of surprises there. Go. And just go with the flow. I like when something's working, I'll just keep adding that and just until I feel like it's enough. I love the texture that I'm creating with this. Is very soft and very organic. So I'm gonna keep adding that until I feel like it's enough. Right? I love that. So let's keep doing this. Great. And so far so good. I want to darken this area here just so that you can kind of tell one leg from the other. So, but I don't want to just fill it in. I want to create some nice kind of fur texture so that it looks like that. Let's move this up. There we go. That's all looking good. It looks like it's alive. It looks like it's very organic. And I love the little kind of splashes of ink that I'm creating just by rubbing the side of its twig on the side of the ink bottle. It's kind of splashing up. And just using this to just kind of naturally bleed it into to the wildflowers here down below. And then maybe just a few more on the other legs to kind of distinguish or separate them from the others. That way it makes more sense. That's looking good. Now, I love the marks that this is making. I'm going to use it a little differently. And I'm just going to use the edge of it. Create some different lines that kind of flow around because there's some wildflowers that are framing this elk, and maybe just create some different textures with it. Just kind of turning it on its side, for example. That's pretty cool. And I like the marks that it's making, just the subtlety with them. When I rub it, when I rub the stick this way sideways, it creates nice texture sideways here. It's gonna frame it nice and grounded. So that's looking good. I want to add just cleaning if I can, just wetting the tip of this branch so that it takes off most of the ink that's on there. Okay. Because I do want to add the last bit of detail for this particular drawing. Just some of the flowers. So I'm going to dry off the tip of it. All right. There we go. So it's nice and dry now. And then I'm going to just use the point of it. I'm not going to use the side of it, just the point of it. Get the extra ink off and just draw some of the flowers the wildflowers that are growing here on the edges, the end of the stems that are growing. Just a few here and there, whatever feels right. Looking good. Maybe some on the left side here as well. Not bad for just a plain old stick. Well, now I feel bad we called it a plain old stick, but very fancy. How's that? A very fancy drawing. So really showing us its versatility. There we go. That's looking good. And let's do this to make it even more interesting. I'm tempted to do this just to kind of add a few marks here and there. Just to make it interesting. I love this blue. There we go. That's looking great. All right, so let's put that down. I'm going to cap this so I don't go overboard because I don't want it to get too heavy-handed. So it's looking great. Let's raise this up high if we can and take a look at what we have. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? That's pretty cool. Let's turn it sideways so you can see the whole composition. I'm glad that we went vertical. I think it's great composition, right? So far, so good. And the only tool we haven't used, I'm surprised I didn't use it for this elk, is this kind of a can opener or paint opener, paint can opener, right? We used the tip of it to create what's very interesting kind of flat pen or calligraphy pen like mark with it. Right. So last, but certainly not least, we have this amazing and this landscape. It's got the log cabin in the foreground. It kind of reminds me of the Sierra Nevadas where I grew up in California, almost like Lake Tahoe a little bit. And it kind of reminds me of Yosemite as well. But it's a beautiful landscape. This one's horizontal, but let's continue to go ahead and make it vertical. So this is our elk so far, looking good, right? And now let's keep going. This time, as promised, right? I am going to use this instrument here, this can opener, this paint can opener, but this time we're going to use everything. Let's do it. Let's use everything that we've used so far, and let's see where that takes us, right? So I believe that's everything except the brush, but that's for the background, so we're not going to include a background for this one. Although I'm tempted to, but I want to see what happens if we just use all of these different tools in this one drawing. Just you're looking at all of these different lines, right? Look at our test lines. That's a lot of variety we can have with this one drawing. Also, we haven't used our black waterproof ink. The cool thing about this ink is, you can do the drawing first and add the watercolor after, and it's not going to spirit or reverse alert. These two, though, are not waterproof, but that's okay. We're just going to do the whole thing in ink and see what happens. So I promised that I was going to use this, right? So let's go ahead and use that. Let's raise this up a little higher so you can see the entire composition. I'm going to put these off to the side. And let's go back to our brown. I'm going to use this can opener thing. We got a little bit of ink on there, but let's go ahead and just make some marks with it. Why not, right? Since we're there. Right, look at this. Pretty handy. It's even got a little ring on it. I mean, I think if you probably shave this down, you can probably make an interesting kind of pen with it. So there we go. That's a lot on there. So let's see what kind of marks we can create with this. I like the width of it. I remember that. So let's do that for the mountain that we see and just make some really solid kind of line work from it. Just some really strong kind of lines with it and see where that takes us. Right. So it doesn't hold much, obviously not meant to hold much ink, but it holds just enough for us to create some really interesting lines. And this goes up and over like that, and it has some rocks and cliffs that just shoot straight down, right? Just like that. That's interesting. And then never thought that I'd be drawing with a paint can opener today, but that's pretty cool that we're doing that. And it's looking great. Look at this. Look at the different types of marks that we're creating and the different weights of those marks. Right. So let's use everything that we've used in the class so far. So we got the paint can opener. Let's use our duct tape, our duct tape pencil. Let's use this one for the other mountain on the left. And this is going to be fun because this has been the most unpredictable. It's got this one kind of corner that soaks up a bunch of ink. And let's switch hands here. Let's draw this one. Let's just kind of paint this one on and see what happens. Just create a nice heavy sort of line that just trails off. Look at that, right? So we can kind of pull this ink down and create some really interesting angles. Okay, just like that. Wow, that's really cool. So let's keep going with that. So far, so good. We're using a paint can opener and duct tape at the end of a pencil. All right, so let's keep going. I like how bold these marks are. It's almost like we're painting with this instrument. We create some different angles and textures. And look at this. It's almost like 3 pens in one. It automatically creates that texture for us. It's kind of floated off this way. So that looks great. All right, so let's set this aside. Happy with that. So far, so good. Wow. Now, let's see what we can do. We haven't used this detail brush in a long time. I am tempted to kind of soften up these lines here that we've added pretty aggressively with the paint can tool and the duct tape pencil. So let's use this detail brush to just give it a little softness, a little bit more of an elegant line, kind of soften up some of the line work, for example, and just kind of define things a little bit more. So just barely holding it just to give it a little bit more detail, for example. This comes up like so. There's some trees up there. Right. There's some vertical marks from the cliff side that just shoot straight down. Like so. And then some of the trees that come up. You can do a little bit of the tree line. So it's almost like you're discovering what kinds of things you can draw as you just literally while you're adding the marks. I think that's a pretty spontaneous way to draw, if you ask me. I think that's a great way to draw. Because it's all about spontaneity, I feel, with drawing. It's, that's when you're making those discoveries and the drawing just starts to feel very spontaneous that way. Really adds to the character of the drawing, right? So we can keep going with this texture. Want to add a little bit more to just give it some weight to some of the ridges here in the mountainside and give it more of a tree line. Right? Give it a little bit of texture, for example. That's good. That looks good. And just using the same tool to just finish off the shape of this kind of lake for us. Some of the water reflection. So it's just, I'm making these kind of discoveries just along the way, just literally while I'm drawing it. It's just seeing what works and, not being afraid to just see what happens if you put that mark down. What's the worst that can happen, right? okay. Gonna be okay. Gonna be more than okay. All right, so that looks good. So far we've used, well, literally four, because we used this if we're counting the little dipper for the ink bottle. We've used the detail brush, the can opener, and the duct tape pencil. Now let's finish off the drawing just to kind of round out class and on an awesome note with this nice landscape that we're drawing. It's looking good so far. I did not expect it to look this good. I was imagining it's gonna, I was looking forward to it being great. But that's okay. No expectations, just draw. So let's just get right to it. I'm gonna use this stick, right? The stick that we have. Been really handy for us. So I'm gonna use this for the log cabin. That's the cabin that's here in the foreground off to the right. It's a great way to sort of finish out the design. And I just noticed just now that there's a little tiny church right on the far end of this bank, the far end of that mountain in the background. It's really beautiful. There you go. It's really charming. It's right there in the background. So let's add the rooftop, right? Just put that rooftop right in there. Gonna be okay. No worries. Just a little vent, the pipe. Okay, kind of a narrow, not that tall. So that's okay. Side of it here and just drawing where it's sitting on this deck out on the water. Really, it kind of trails off back away from us like so. Then draw the side. And we just kind of fill in anything we want, right? Which is really just gets really fun here going forward. I'm having so much fun drawing all of these different tools. I just want to keep going the drawing this way. I want to go on location actually and draw this way because it's really fun. I think it's just interesting way to draw. So I love, remember how this just turned on its side, created some interesting graphics for us. I'm going to continue that. Right. So I'm going to do that using really just the side of it to create some heavier lines like so. And we're almost there. Can you believe it? The kinds of drawings that we did today. Amazing. Well, look at that. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and finish off. I don't want to finish because I have so much, I'm having so much fun drawing with you all. And just, you know, this is why I love to draw, just making discoveries along the way. I'm going to draw the beam coming down here, posts into the water, just holding up this house. And let's, you know, it wouldn't be a house without windows. Let's not forget the windows, right? Let's not forget that. There we go. Okay, that's the roof line that we didn't put in there yet. So let's add the windows. A couple of windows here and there. This one here. It's panel windows, almost like French windows. There we go. And then there's a few windows right on the side here. Just kind of go off into the distance. Maybe add some texture in there. Make it interesting. Same here. Look at how much ink this little piece of wood holds. It just goes on for days, isn't it? I love that. And last but not least, just kind of finish things off if you want to. You know, you can go as far as you can. I do want to finish off with, because I promised that we're going to use every single drawing tool that we found. And look at that. That's looking pretty amazing. I'm so happy with this drawing. So let's just add a few more marks with this. Maybe some bolder marks to create or suggest some of the shadows that are in the water, right? And there's also a little boat, maybe two. It's kind of a couple of canoes, basically, just kind of sitting here waiting for us to use. Okay. And maybe finish off the edge of this mountain, the other side of the river here. Just kind of connect them. There we go. All right. Now, the only thing we haven't used out of all the things, so far, look at this. Look at the lineup. It's so funny. Right. Well, actually, let's do this towards the end of the drawing. So that way we can kind of line things up and maybe even take a snapshot of it and remind us how fun it is to just draw with different instruments, right? So far, so good. Here's a little close up of some of the line work. You can see, look at all that variation we're getting just with the different tools. It's almost creating different values too, because it's marking, it's making for different intensities in the ink, right? Sometimes it holds more ink and creates a different value, sometimes barely any, and it creates these really beautiful light values and marks as well, right? So to finish it off, last but not least, is we have our lovely twig. We didn't forget you, twig. All right, so we're going after today for variety, for change, creativity, energy, and making interesting marks. Here we go. Let's celebrate that by finishing off this drawing with just this twig. I want to add maybe just a line in the background to kind of frame the drawing a little bit, and maybe just a little bit of texture here as well. Because I remember this from the other drawings we had just to create some ripples in the water. I think that would be interesting. Love that. That's already looking really interesting, right? It looks like it's alive. It looks like it's moving. That's what we want. Okay. Just like that. All right, almost there. Just adding it to the foreground. And just until you feel like you're good, right? You don't want to put too much on there because it's going to be hard to kind of take things out and edit them. So I suggest whenever you're drawing with ink, especially when you're drawing with ink, to keep the paste nice and steady and not get too heavy-handed and not put down too much ink and go too heavy too fast. I love the way this is going, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up with this drawing here, and really just with all of our drawings for today. And let's do a little recap to see what kind of things that we came up with. I think it'd be great to line up all of these tools that we used. Can you believe it? Look at this. Let's line them all up. I'm going to dry them so it doesn't wet our paper. Okay. Remember this, right? So that's how we started off with. Let's do this. Okay, so let's line up just right here on the bottom. Let's move this over to the right. Okay, so we have our sticks, our detail brush, right? Really, the funniest thing that we've used, we have our can opener. Can you believe it? We use the can opener to draw with, and it works. And we have our duct tape onto a pencil. So let's do that. Take a nice photo of it here on our desktop, just to remember, to remind us what kinds of things we can draw with. That's really pretty handy. But let's recap. Let's take a look at our drawings. And look at what we achieved today, just in one day, just using all kinds of different marks. So we started off with this. This is really, I feel like this is one of the most important things that we did today, because it really allowed us to get an idea of what kind of marks we can create, what kind of line intensities we can create, all things that are important in creating very interesting drawings, really. And also gave us some different characteristics of the drawings, which was really helpful in creating some different types of different feel in each of the drawings and different personalities. So that was super handy. So let's keep this. I actually want to hold on to this. It'll remind me, maybe I might actually write out what each of these lines, what each of these ink lines are. Right, so let's put that aside there. And the first drawing that we did, remember a little bird? Let's not forget that. That was sort of our test drawing, just kind of playing around with it, right? Great, it's a nice simple drawing. It's got this kind of cross composition, and we did a light texture in the background to create a different mood. And I think that I love the most is this texture that we created in this background here to create some of the wildflowers, some of the brushes around the flower and the bird, right? So that's great. And then we also did the elk next. The elk, really where it started to come together, because we started to learn almost like at each step along the way, it got more and more, we became more and more knowledgeable about what kinds of marks we can apply and what they could do, what their abilities are really, and what their limitations are. So most especially what the different characteristics are for each tool. And that's really where it started to make sense here. And there's so much I love about this drawing. I think it's very simple and it started to work for us, but I also love this part right here. We just be able to create with the twig and this stick, really just creating both kind of a delicate drawing and a very robust, very strong line work. And that creates this really nice drawing, I feel, of this. Oh, and that's the composition there, so you can see the whole thing. Very cool. All right. And last but not least, we created our landscape, the only one that was a horizontal orientation. And this, we just used everything, right? We just used all of our found tools. Everything was found except for the detail brush, the only brush that I purchased. Everything else I discovered along the way. So, wow, that was amazing. I feel like I am inspired to keep drawing with these different tools more. In fact, I'm inspired to bring them on location with me. I don't know why I don't, because they have actually a lot of control. There really is a lot of control. I just need to, make sure that I have a good container for my ink so I don't spill them, because they're not like fountain pens where they have a reservoir. So, and that's it. They have a ton of control for the kind of drawing that I want to do, and the kind of spontaneous type of drawing that I want to do. So yes, the right tools can make drawing easier. I just want to, let's see here. Great. All right, so yes, the right tools can make drawing easier and make me more comfortable and more efficient and more well-balanced kind of marks and smoother lines and shades. But today I think I really liked the contrast to that. I think they complement each other quite well. Contrast to that being that we're adding all kinds of interesting marks and different creativity and really just using our imagination and spontaneity. There's nothing like spontaneity in drawing that's going to make your drawing that much more vibrant and more dynamic. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you can join me for all of my other classes, my drawingXlive classes here. I'm Jedidiah Dore. Thanks for joining me here at Drawing Expressions. Have a good one.